Greetings, fellow Earthlings. With the COVID-19 pandemic winding down, we still are looking forward to being able to meet in person inside our amazing Zeiss Planetarium at the Chabot Space and Science Center. We will be open to the public in 6 months from now, November 2021. Until then, we can always use nature's planetarium, also known as the real sky, to step outside, tilt our heads back, and see at least some of the amazing things I'll be pointing out for you tonight. I'm of course talking about the constellations. There are people, animals, and objects up in the night sky. They've been there for millennia, but most people are unaware of them as they glide by unnoticed right over our heads every clear night. Tonight, let us explore these objects and characters and let them become our friends and familiars, just as the ancients did. To start, let's consider the reason we don't see all the constellations at once. The Earth has 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Well, the constellations also have seasons, having to do with the Earth's yearly orbital path around the Sun. I want you to think about that for a moment. The constellations have seasons too. Just realizing this fully can help make knowing the constellations easier. We can only see stars by looking away from the Sun at night, which changes our views of the stars as the Earth makes its orbit around the Sun throughout the year. Unfortunately, unless you're at a good dark sky site, and if the moon isn't too bright, most constellations will be somewhat hard to see fully, but most constellations have at least a few bright stars to help identify them, and the better your viewing location, the more you'll be able to see. Additionally, we are now in the summer season, which means longer days and more to the point, shorter nights. It only gets truly dark late in the evening, about 10:30 p.m., which would have been 9:30 p.m. had we not implemented what astronomers lovingly call daylight squandering time. With these factors forcing a late start time, a good first step to finding the constellations is done by knowing your compass directions. We can easily do this without a compass, using the star grouping that is quite easy to see, and most everyone knows, the Big Dipper. If you don't know the Big Dipper, have someone who does know it point it out to you. Around this time of year, the Dipper is getting a little low toward the northwest, but is still easy to see with its curving handle and bowl. Take special note to the 2 stars at the end of the bowl. These are called the pointers, because if you take the distance between them and extend the distance about 5 times their length, they point to the semi-bright star here. Now, Polaris is the only star in the entire sky that stays pretty much right where it is, so no matter what time of night it is, or even what month of the year it is, all you need to do is face it, and you'll always be facing due north, with east directly to your right, west directly to your left, and south directly behind you. All the other stars wheel around this pivot point anti-clockwise, making them appear to rise in the east and set in the west. This is, of course, an illusion caused by the Earth's rotation, which gives the appearance that the stars are moving, when in fact it is the Earth that's spinning. If you think of the Earth as a spinning top and you extend Earth's North Pole axis straight up into the sky, it points almost directly at Polaris. Using Polaris, we found all the compass directions, but Polaris is also the end of the Little Dipper's handle, whose official name is Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, a small constellation. It's a bit faint, but from Polaris, you might be able to trace its curving handle to its bowl. The 2 brighter stars at the end of its bowl are called the Guardians, because they seem to march around the North Star like protective sentries throughout the night. Starting between the bowls of the Big and Little Dippers, arcing up over the Little Dipper, we find the tail of Draco the Dragon. He also has feet, a short belly, and a long neck and squarish head. There be dragons up there. I'll bet you didn't know that. But now you do. Now you probably did notice that I called the Little Dipper, also known as Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, a constellation. whereas earlier I called the Big Dipper a star grouping. Isn't the Big Dipper a constellation too? Nope. The Big Dipper is what we astronomers call an asterism, which is only a familiar star grouping. An asterism can be part of a single constellation, or it can be made up of stars from more than one constellation, like the Summer Triangle, which we'll get to shortly. The Big Dipper is only part of the constellation Ursa Major, the Big Bear, as seen here. He's somewhat sitting up from this view, but as you can see, the tip of the so-called Big Dipper's handle is his nose. The Dipper's curving handle is the back of his neck, and the Dipper's bowl is like a saddle on the bear's back. The Big Dipper is a very handy asterism, because we can use it to find the constellation Borealis, the herdsman. To find Borealis, all you have to do is follow the arc of the Big Dipper's handle until you reach the bright star Arcturus, which is in the lap of Borealis. If you saw his name spelled out, you'd want to pronounce it Booties, but it's Borealis. At this time of the year, he's a bit face down, but he's got a big head, a cap, a body in a sitting position, with a leg and a foot and his pipe. A simple shepherd smoking his pipe while watching over his flock. Looking back towards the east, we find the rather faint constellation Cepheus the King. He's definitely upside down at this time, but he's got a triangular crown, a face in profile, a stylish pigtail, and he's smiling 'cause he's the king. At this juncture, let us turn around and face the southern horizon. This will allow us to see the rest of the night's constellations more easily, like so. Arcing above the southern horizon is a kind of invisible line where all the zodiacal constellations can be found. This line is called the ecliptic, and is also where the sun, moon, and planets move along. This is why the zodiacal constellations were so significant to astrologers. Not that astronomy scientists believe in the pseudoscience of astrology, most don't, but astrologers were some of history's first astronomers, and for their early work we are in their debt. Starting in the east and moving to the west, we have the constellations Aquarius, the water bearer, who hasn't fully risen yet, Capricornus, the goat, who currently contains the planet Saturn in his body, Sagittarius, the archer with his bow, Scorpius, the scorpion with his bright reddish heart, Antares, Libra, the scales, and Virgo, the virgin, whose head is just beginning to dip below the western horizon. We'll only talk about the goat, the archer, and the scorpion tonight, as they are bright enough and high enough to actually be seen. Starting just above the southeast horizon, we find Capricornus, the goat, with his horn, head, body, legs, and tail. Just in his chest, we find everyone's favorite ringed planet, Saturn. If you get a chance to look at it through a telescope, do it. It's quite amazing. Pictures on the computer or in a book are fine, but seeing it with your own eyes through a telescope is a different, sometimes inspirational experience. To the right of the goat crawls the giant insect Scorpius the Scorpion, whose zodiacal name is Scorpio. He's got 2 claws, a long body with his bright reddish heart, Antares, and tail with stinger. He's fairly bright and should be easily visible even in semi-polluted skies. Antares is so named because it's reddish and found close to the ecliptic, just like the planet Mars. Remember, all the planets move along the ecliptic, and sometimes it brings Mars and Antares into close proximity to each other. Those familiar with Greek mythology will recall that Ares is the Greek god of war, and the planet Mars was thought to represent Ares. To avoid confusing the 2 reddish stars with each other, they called one Ares, aka Mars, and the other Antares, or not Mars, those clever Greeks. Leaving the ecliptic and going back to Borealis, the herdsman, just below his head is a pretty little constellation, Corona Borealis, the northern crown, with a semi-bright jewel star in the middle, Gemma. Using the tips of the northern crown as pointers, we can find the keystone of Hercules at the very top of the sky, an asterism. That is his head, with the rest of his body, limbs, and club seen thusly. Trailing behind Hercules, we see Lyra, the lyre, which is a small Greek harp and not someone who tells untruths. It contains one of the brightest stars in the sky, Vega, the first star to show of the asterism, the summer triangle, which we'll see in a few moments. To the left of Lyra, we find the constellation Cygnus, the Swan, with his bright tail star, Deneb, which is also part of the aforementioned asterism, the summer triangle. Below both Lyra and Cygnus is the constellation Aquila, the Eagle, with its bright eye, Altair, which is the third and final summer triangle star, and here it is. The summer triangle is very easy to see, even in fairly light-polluted skies. It is also a kind of unofficial direction pointer, as it points almost directly due south. And that's it. There are other, smaller or fainter constellations out there, which I encourage you to look for using a good book and maybe a pair of binoculars too. Speaking of good books, I cannot more highly recommend the book, The Stars, A New Way to See Them, by the author H.A. Rey, who you may know as the same author who wrote the Curious George books. Rey was a scientist who wasn't satisfied with the way modern star charts were drawn. The astroscientists were not interested in the characters, objects, or stories behind the constellations. So, for convenience, they just connected the brighter stars into weird geometric shapes, slapped on their Greek names, many of which would mean nothing to the common person, and left it at that. That's all fine and well for them, but for us regular folk, we're more interested in the fun stuff. If you really want to learn the constellations, get Rey's book, which can be purchased from Amazon for about $18. I'd also recommend getting a pair of binoculars before getting a telescope. Binoculars are cheaper and easier to use, and there are many wonderful deep sky objects that can actually be best seen with just a pair of binoculars that are noted in Rey's book. If you do want to get a telescope, ask us or research on the web how to make an informed purchase. Be warned, there are a lot of bad telescopes out there with cheap components and shaky, muddy, fuzzy views that will disappoint you every time. A good scope will inspire you and your children to a lifetime of deep space exploration and an appreciation of science and nature in general. If you're interested in getting into the hobby of astronomy, joining a local astronomy club can be most helpful. Chabot is partnered with EAS, the East Bay Astronomical Society, which has many activities and resources you'll find essential to help you get started in this amazing and beautiful study of our natural universe. Thanks for watching this video. If you like this content, be sure to click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell notification icon to find out when new content has been uploaded. This will really help our channel to grow, which will make us all very happy. And until we meet again, we'll see you in the future!